The sun blazed above the dusty red sand of a small village in Anambra State, but that wasn't what drew the crowd that day. It was them. Two well-dressed men, their kaftan dusty and their faces bruised by sorrow, were kneeling on the bare ground in front of a crumbling mud house. They weren't visitors. They weren't strangers. They were the sons of the blind beggar woman who sat on a broken stool by the door, her eyes pale with years of darkness. Jerry and Johnson, the once famous billionaire brothers of Lekki. Tears poured down their faces, mixing with dust. Jerry clutched her frail hand in both of his, while Johnson bent forward, forehead pressed to the ground like a child begging for a miracle. "Mama, forgive us," Jerry cried. We were blinded by success." The villagers watched, stunned. Some whispered, some cried. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Amaka didn't speak for a long moment. Her lips trembled slightly, but her voice was calm. "I only asked you to remember me," she said. "Was that too much?" Her question wasn't angry. It was the kind that pierces deeper than a scream. Jerry and Johnson broke down again, louder this time, and then she asked the question that stilled everyone. "What did I do wrong?" "My children." Amaka was just 25 when her husband Andrew died in a tragic accident. He was a mechanic in Lagos and had gone out on a late call when a drunk driver ended his life. His body was returned in a casket, and with it, every plan they had made together. She was left with two sons, Jerry and Johnson, just 5 years old. No savings, no job, no family support. But Amaka was not the kind of woman to give up. She buried her dreams of becoming a fashion designer. She stopped weaving her hair, stopped wearing fancy wrappers. Her beauty faded under the harsh sun of survival. Her hands hardened, her shoulders carried burdens no woman should bear alone. She started small, hawking vegetables, then roasting corn. But when it wasn't enough for school fees, she began carrying blocks at construction sites. She, a woman barely 5 feet tall, was now dragging cement, lifting blocks, sweating like a laborer just so her sons could go to school. People laughed at her. Some warned her she would break her back. But Amaka only smiled and said, "Let my back break. Let their future rise." Years passed. Jerry was admitted to study software engineering at the University of Lagos. Johnson got into chemical engineering. Amaka sold everything, her wrappers, her jewelry, her wedding ring, to make it happen. And when things got harder, she started a firewood business. She would go deep into the forest, cut and split logs, and sell them in the market. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a hot Saturday. Jerry and Johnson had called her that morning, asking for money to submit their final year projects. "I'll send it tomorrow morning," she promised them. She had almost finished splitting a large piece of wood when the blade slipped. The dry log shattered, and a sharp piece of it sprang like a bullet, hitting her square in both eyes. She screamed. By the time her neighbors rushed her to the hospital, the damage was done. "The corneas are torn," the doctor said. "We need to operate immediately. 5 million naira. 5 million. She had 500. She called her sons. They came. They looked. They cried a little. Then they left. "We'll try and find help from school," Jerry had said. But the calls stopped. The texts dried up. No one came back. Amaka lay in darkness, alone. Time passed. She became the woman who sat by the road with a metal bowl, begging for food. Some gave her coins, others threw insults. Still, she prayed for Jerry and Johnson every day. "Let them be great. Let them find joy, even if I never see them again." But one day, a man came from Lagos. His name was Emeka. He was shocked to find her in rags, her eyes pale and unfocused. "I work with Jerry's company," he said, confused. "They call him the Golden Boy of Nigerian tech. And Johnson, he's a senior engineer at that new oil firm in Lekki. They're billionaires." Amaka's lips trembled. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I saw them in Range Rovers last week, buying drinks for everyone at the club." That night, inside her small, leaking room, Amaka knelt beside her thin mattress and whispered the prayer that changed everything. "God, I gave up everything. My youth, my dreams, my body, my eyes, everything for my children. And this is my reward? Abandonment? Mockery? If truly you are just, let them feel what it's like to lose everything they think makes them powerful." It wasn't long. Within 2 months, The destruction began. First, Jerry lost his job. Someone had framed him an anonymous report of fraud. HR couldn't prove it, but the board panicked. He was dismissed. Johnson was next. The oil company pulled out of Nigeria due to legal issues. Layoffs began. Johnson was on the list. Then came the flooding, their mansions in Lekki seized by the government for environmental violations. Then came the scam, millions wiped from their accounts in what seemed like a phishing attack. They still tried to hold on until one night, their Range Rover and Mercedes were stolen at gunpoint. Everything was gone, and with it, the friends, the praise, the women, the noise. From club kings to couch surfers, they started attending interviews, overqualified, they were told. We'll get back to you. They heard again and again. No one ever did. Eventually, in desperation, they visited a native doctor. He didn't look up, just laughed and said, "You abandoned the woman who gave you everything. Her tears were her sacrifice. Now, her words are your curse." They left that place in silence. Jerry turned to Johnson. "We have to go home." Johnson nodded. "We have to find Mama." As they entered the village gate, dusty and broken, a small boy recognized them and shouted, "Mama Amaka's sons are here." Within minutes, the entire village was gathered. All eyes watched the mighty fall. As they reached the old mud house, Jerry dropped to his knees. Johnson followed. "Mama." Her blind eyes turned toward the sound of her sons. She said nothing, and then she asked a question that made even the wind stop. "What did I do wrong, my children?" There was a strange silence after she spoke, like the earth itself paused to listen. "What did I do wrong, my children?" Jerry could no longer hold back. His body shook. He placed his head on his mother's knees and wept like a little boy. "Mama, you did nothing wrong," he cried. "We were fools, blinded by success." Johnson's chest heaved. "We thought we were strong, but we were weak. And we forgot the woman who made us everything we are." Amaka's frail hands slowly reached out, touched Jerry's face. Her fingers trembled as they traced the tears on his cheeks. "You've lost weight," she whispered. "I know your bones. I carried you in my womb." Then she turned to the sound of Johnson's voice. "And you, my baby, I dreamed of you last night. You were crying, and now here you are." The villagers stood in quiet awe, some with hands over their mouths, others wiping away tears. A woman at the back muttered, "This is what we talk about. The world forgets mothers." An elderly man added, "But God does not forget." Amaka tried to stand up from her stool, but her knees buckled. Jerry held her quickly. "Mama, please don't stress yourself," he said. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "You know, I begged on the roadside, not because I was hungry, but because I wanted someone to hear me. Not my voice, but my silence." They all stood there, three broken hearts, trying to become whole again. Until Amaka did something no one expected. She smiled. "I forgive you." 1 year earlier, it was the party of the year. Lekki Phase 1 was alive with music, lights, and laughter. The brothers were being hailed left and right. "Big boy Jerry." "Ogre Johnson, how far now?" "Money no be problem." Champagne sprayed in the air like rain. They stood by their fleet of cars, sunglasses on at night, wristwatches that gleamed like stars. That night, Jerry toasted with a glass in hand. To freedom, to success, to not answering to anyone. They both laughed. They had blocked Amaka's number. "She always calls like it's an emergency." Johnson had once joked. "She doesn't understand we're building a legacy," Jerry added. But in truth, they were running from the guilt, from the voice in their hearts that whispered, "What if she needs you?" But every time it came, they drowned it in parties, promotions, and praises, until the fall came. Back in the village, Amaka sat between her sons, each one holding her hand like a shield. They stayed in the mud house that night. There were no lights, just the glow of the moon through the broken window. "Mama," Johnson said, "we'll take you back to Lagos with us. Please." She was quiet. "We'll fix everything. Get you a better house, food, everything. Just come with us," Jerry pleaded. Amaka gave a soft laugh. "You think it's just about the house?" Jerry froze. "I didn't lose my sight because of poverty. I lost it because of love," she said, turning toward the ceiling. "I wanted to send you money for your project," she continued. "I had no one else. Just me and the firewood. I cut, and it cut me back." The room fell silent. Outside, the villagers had started going home, but no one could forget what they had seen. The story would be told for generations. "Will you come with us, Mama?" Johnson asked again. "I will come," she finally said. "But promise me one thing." "Anything, Mama," they chorused. "Don't lose yourself again," she whispered. "If money makes you forget your roots, then it's not a blessing. It's a test." They left early the next morning. After gathering a few of her things, her wrapper, her Bible, and the thin mattress. As the old taxi drove out of the village, Amaka sat between them quietly. She didn't cry. She just listened. To the wind, to the road, to the sound of her sons together again. Back in Lagos, they moved her into a private room in a luxury apartment in Banana Island. She had her own caregiver, Nneka, a sweet young lady who helped her bathe, cook, and read to her. But the brothers weren't done. "We're taking Mama abroad," Jerry said. "For surgery," Johnson added. "She will see again." They flew her to India. The doctor looked at her eyes and said, "There's a chance. It won't be easy, but there's hope." Amaka smiled. "That's all I need." 2 months later, she opened her eyes. Slowly, light flooded in like the first sunrise. At first, it was blurry. Then she saw shapes. Then faces. Jerry, Johnson, her boys. They weren't little anymore. But their faces. She still recognized them. "Mama, can you see us?" Jerry asked, holding her hand. Amaka blinked. Tears welled up. "Yes, I can see again." They cried together. Right there in the hospital room, it was a new beginning, but Amaka knew better. Life doesn't always give second chances, and when it does, you hold it tightly. One morning, Amaka stood on the balcony of their new mansion. Her eyes filled with the light of the world she thought she'd never see again. She turned to Jerry and Johnson. "Have you told them yet?" she asked. "Told who, Mama?" Jerry replied. She smiled. "The people who praised you when you had money and forgot you when you lost it." They looked at her, confused, but Amaka turned back toward the horizon. "They need to hear your story. Because sometimes redemption isn't complete until it becomes a message for others." The grand hall of the Youth Leadership Conference was packed rows upon rows of young Nigerians, dressed smartly, holding notebooks, phones, and hopeful eyes. At the center of the glittering stage stood 2 men, Jerry and Johnson. Behind them was a large screen showing a photo of their mother, Amaka, taken a few weeks after her eye surgery. Her smile beamed across the screen. The audience murmured in curiosity. Jerry stepped forward first, holding the microphone. "My name is Jerry, and I am one of the biggest failures you've ever seen." The room fell silent. "But not the kind of failure you think," he added, voice steady. "I had money. I had fame. I had respect. But I abandoned the very woman who gave me life." Gasps echoed in the crowd. Johnson stepped up. "We forgot our mother, and because of that, we lost everything. Not because she cursed us, but because we cursed ourselves." With pride, they both bowed their heads. And then Jerry lifted his again. "Today, we're not here as billionaires. We're here as sons. And we want to share our story, not for pity, but so none of you make the same mistake we did." 4 months earlier, after Amaka regained her sight, the brothers started doing something they hadn't done in years. Listening. They listened as she told them about how she used to boil water before they came back from school to make it look like food was cooking. They listened as she described using an empty kerosene bottle filled with stones just to balance her tray of firewood on her head. They listened as she shared how every night, after carrying blocks, her shoulders burned like fire, but she never let herself cry until they were asleep. They listened, and slowly, something changed in them. They no longer rushed out for parties. They no longer ignored calls from family. They started living. With intention, they started a foundation in Amaka's name, the Mother's Light Initiative. Their first project? Sponsoring 100 widows across Nigeria with business capital and healthcare. "Every widow is a warrior," Johnson said during the press conference. "Our mother lost her sight carrying firewood. No widow should go through that again." Back at the conference, a young man in the audience raised his hand. "Yes, go ahead," Jerry said. "I'm sorry, sir." The young man began nervously. "But how do you forgive yourselves?" "After everything?" The room held its breath. Jerry nodded slowly. "We still cry sometimes. But Mama told us something that changed us. Johnson continued. She said, "Don't waste your pain. Let it be the reason someone else doesn't suffer like I did." Another hand went up. "Did your mother ever consider cursing you?" This time, it was Amaka's voice that answered. She had been sitting quietly at the front row. "I cursed the pain, not my sons." She stood up. "I asked God to take away what made them forget me, not to destroy them, but to bring them back to themselves." The entire room stood and clapped. Many were already in tears. It wasn't just a conference anymore. It was a revival of conscience. Meanwhile, in the background, not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the Lagos elite, whispers had begun. How did those boys get their companies back? I thought they were finished. Maybe that old woman did juju for them. One man, Chief Ojo, a former rival of their father, was particularly bothered. He had tried to buy out Jerry's tech company when Jerry was down, but was blocked when the board reinstated Jerry after investigations proved he was innocent. And now, he was watching them rise again. Second chances? He scoffed in his car as he watched the conference on livestream. They don't deserve it. He picked up his phone. "Tell our legal team to dig deeper. We'll find something." The redemption path wasn't going to be smooth. Not everyone celebrates your comeback. Some want to bury you where they thought you fell. Back at their mansion in Banana Island, the house was quiet. Amaka sat on a soft sofa, sipping warm tea. Her new caregiver, Neka, gently rubbed her feet. Jerry and Johnson sat at her feet, like little boys again. "Mama," Jerry said softly, "do you ever regret not remarrying?" Amaka chuckled. "Do you know how many men came with promises?" They laughed. "I said no to all of them, not because love wasn't nice, but because you were enough." Johnson looked up, his eyes glassy. "We don't deserve you." Amaka touched his cheek. "No, my son. You didn't. But now, you're trying. And that's all a mother needs." Then, something unexpected happened. Amaka looked at them both. "I had a dream," she said slowly. "About your father." They leaned in. "He said something is coming, something big. But it's not just for you. It's for others too. You'll have to make a choice." Jerry and Johnson exchanged glances. "What kind of choice?" Johnson asked. But Amaka didn't answer. She simply said, "You'll know when the time comes." 3 weeks later, an anonymous letter arrived at their office. No return address, no stamp, just 5 words. "She is not your mother." Jerry stared at it. Johnson read it twice. And Amaka, she sat quietly by the window, watching the rain fall, her face unreadable. The envelope sat between them on the conference room table, heavy with silence. Jerry stared at the 5 words again. "She is not your mother." His fingers trembled. Johnson leaned back in his chair, hands locked behind his head, trying to laugh it off, but his eyes told another story. "Who would write something like this?" he muttered. Jerry looked around the room. "And why now? After everything? Just when things are getting good again?" They thought about the people who could be behind it. Old enemies, jealous competitors, bitter extended relatives. But this felt calculated, too precise, too personal. "It's someone who knows us," Jerry said quietly. Johnson nodded. "And wants to break us." Back home, Amaka was in the kitchen, humming an old Igbo lullaby as she helped Neka slice plantains. She wore a soft pink wrapper, her sight fully restored, and her spirit lighter than it had been in years. Jerry walked in with the envelope behind his back. "Mama," he said. She smiled at the sound of his voice. "My son, how was your day?" He didn't answer. Instead, he sat down and placed the letter on the table. "Mama, we got this today." Amaka wiped her hands, picked up the letter, and read the words. Her hands went still. Then she folded the paper neatly and looked at them both. "I've been expecting this," she said. Johnson blinked. "You what?" "I knew someone would eventually try to take what I have," she said, sitting down slowly. "They tried it when you were small too, but I was too poor for them to bother." Jerry's chest tightened. "Mama, is it true?" Her eyes glistened with tears, but not of sadness. "No," she whispered. "You are my blood, my sons. No paper, no gossip, no rich enemy can change that." Johnson exhaled. Jerry reached for her hand. "Then why were you expecting it?" She smiled faintly. "Because the higher you rise, the more the devil sends lies to shake your foundation. She leaned closer and added, "And sometimes, those lies hide a deeper truth." 26 years ago, Amaka was newly married. Her husband Andrew had taken her to a hospital in Enugu after their 5th miscarriage. The doctor had said she could never carry a baby full term. "But I want to try again," she cried. "You could die, madam," the doctor warned. And then, one rainy night, a woman knocked on their door. Her wrapper was soaked, her face desperate. In her arms were 2 tiny babies. "I can't raise them," she said. "Their father has disappeared. I've not eaten in 2 days. Please." Andrew looked at Amaka. Her eyes were filled with silent understanding. They took the boys in. They named them Jerry and Johnson. And from that night forward, they were hers, blood or not. But she had never told them, not because she was ashamed, but because love had made them hers in every way that mattered. Back in the present, Amaka sat in the living room that night, alone, thinking. The letter was now torn and thrown in the trash. She whispered to herself, "They don't need to know everything. Not yet." But the past has its own voice, and sometimes it doesn't stay buried. Meanwhile, across town, Chief Ojo sat with a man in a dark suit, a private investigator. "So, did you find it?" he asked. The man dropped a file on the table. Birth records. The boys were adopted. Quietly. No legal paperwork. Just a village arrangement. Chief Ojo smiled. "Perfect." The man raised a brow. "But why are you digging into this now?" Ojo sipped his brandy. "Because I offered to buy Jerry's company. He refused. And now I will make sure the world questions who he really is." The man leaned in. "So you want to expose them?" Ojo chuckled. "No. I want to control them." 2 weeks later, Jerry and Johnson were invited to the National Youth Innovation Awards in Abuja. The president himself was expected to attend. Amaka, glowing in a purple lace gown, sat at their table beside their wives, Cynthia and Adana. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. Right in the middle of the award presentation, a reporter stood up, microphone in hand. "Mr. Jerry Anderson," he began, "a document has surfaced suggesting that you and your brother may not be the biological children of the woman you publicly call your mother. Can you confirm or deny this?" The room fell into stunned silence. Cameras flashed. People murmured. Johnson stood immediately. "What sort of nonsense is that?" Jerry raised his hand to calm him. Then he turned to the crowd. "We'll answer that question," he said calmly. "But not here." He turned and walked out. The spotlight now a storm cloud hanging over everything they'd rebuilt. That night, back in their home, Jerry entered his mother's room quietly. She sat by the window again. "Mama," he began. "I heard," she said softly. He knelt beside her. "Is there something you need to tell us?" She didn't answer right away. Then, with tears in her eyes, she reached for something under her pillow. It was an old baby cloth, torn and faded. She placed it in his hands and said, "It's time you knew everything." The old baby cloth felt rough in Jerry's hands, worn thin from years of holding it close. It was light pink once. Now it was faded and stained, the edges fraying. Embroidered in barely readable thread were the letters J. J. Jerry looked up at his mother. "What is this?" Amaka smiled gently. "The only thing I had when I brought you home." She reached for his hand and squeezed it. "I didn't give you life in my womb," she whispered. "But I gave you everything else I had. My time, my strength, my sight, my future." Johnson, who had entered the room moments earlier, stood frozen. I don't understand," he muttered. Amaka sat back, her voice trembling now. "You were barely a month old when your birth mother brought you to me. She had no food, no family. She thought she was dying. I didn't plan to keep you," she continued. "But when I held you both that night, something changed. I felt love stronger than anything I had ever known." Jerry's voice cracked. "And Papa?" "He agreed," she said. "He told me, 'These boys may not carry your blood, Amaka, but they carry your destiny.'" The room was quiet. Outside, the city of Lagos buzzed with lights and noise. But in that moment, inside this room, the world stood still. Johnson's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell us before?" "Because," she said, "I didn't want you to ever feel like less, and I never felt like less of a mother." Jerry covered his face with both hands, emotions crashing over him like waves. "We've failed you so many times," he said. "And you still gave us everything." Amaka held both their hands now, her grip surprisingly strong. "You didn't fail me," she said. "You got lost. And you found your way back. That's what matters." 1 week later, the truth had reached the media. News blogs ran wild. Billionaire brothers adopted. Amaka, the firewood woman, was not their birth mother, but Jerry and Johnson were ready. At a nationally televised press conference, Jerry stepped forward in a navy blue suit. Johnson stood beside him. Amaka, seated on a comfortable chair, wore a simple white gown and soft gelée. "My name is Jerry," he began. "And yes, I was adopted." Murmurs ran through the audience, "But I am also the son of a woman who risked everything to raise me, who gave up her eyesight, her dreams, her entire youth, just so I could become something." Johnson spoke next. "If blood makes a mother, then half the women in this country wouldn't be mothers. Love made her our mother, and we are proud to carry her name." The entire audience stood in applause. Journalists lowered their cameras, many of them in tears. And the world finally understood. Motherhood is not defined by biology, but by sacrifice. A year later, it was a sunny Saturday at the Grand Hall of the Golden River Estate in Banana Island. The twin weddings of the century were underway. Jerry stood at the altar, smiling with emotion as Cynthia, radiant in a long white gown, walked toward him. Beside him, Johnson wiped his eyes as Adana, in an elegant ivory dress, approached with her father. Amaka sat front row, glowing in gold lace, eyes full of light and joy, holding a bouquet of fresh white roses. As the priest said, "Who gives these women to these men?" Both brides turned to Amaka, and in perfect harmony, they said, "She does." Amaka stood up, walked toward them, and placed their hands in her son's. "I raised them, and I released them," she said softly. The entire hall erupted in emotion. Some guests sobbed, others clapped. Even the wedding planner wiped tears. It was not just a wedding, it was a restoration. 9 months later, Jerry and Cynthia welcomed twin boys, Joshua and Jonathan. Johnson and Adana had a beautiful baby girl, Amarachi. The house was filled with laughter, baby cries, and the soft lullabies Amaka hummed late at night. One day, as Amaka sat on the balcony holding baby Amarachi, Jerry joined her. "Mama, I think about that night sometimes," he said. "Which one?" "The night you prayed and everything fell apart for us." She smiled. "Sometimes," she whispered, "God allows everything to fall apart so that something better can be built." He nodded. "We're the proof." She held his hand tightly. "No, you are the proof. That love can fix anything, even abandonment." At another youth gathering, this time with over 50 attendees, Jerry and Johnson stood side by side once more. Behind them was a massive screen showing Amaka, now a global ambassador for their Mother's Light Foundation, speaking to women in Kenya, India, and Ghana. Johnson spoke first. "We were abandoned by success," Jerry continued, "but rescued by truth and the mercy of a mother who should have turned away but didn't." They both paused, then said in unison, "Don't wait until it's too late to honor the woman who carried your future." The crowd stood in roaring applause. Somewhere backstage, Amaka wiped her tears and whispered, "Now, my work is complete." If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.